Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. The landline rang at 7:12 a.m., slicing through the quiet of my kitchen like a warning bell. It had been years since anyone called me that early. I was halfway through pouring coffee into my chipped blue cup, the one with a faded sunflower decal, when the sound stopped me cold. My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever started with a call before sunrise. I wiped my hand on a dish towel and picked up the receiver. Hello, Olivia? My father's voice was calm, almost too calm. Harold Beckett never called just to chat. If he sounded composed, it meant bad news was being dressed up like an apology. Dad, is everything okay? There was a pause. I could hear him breathing, slow and deliberate, like he was counting each exhale. I wanted to call you before Mason's graduation, he said finally. To avoid confusion, I set the coffee pot down harder than I meant to. What kind of confusion? He cleared his throat. We've decided to keep the ceremony small, an intimate gathering for immediate family only. I blinked at the empty wall in front of me. I'm Mason's sister. What are you talking about? It's just, he hesitated. I could picture him sitting at the kitchen table back home, thumb rubbing at his temple like he always did when he wanted to sound reasonable. Mason wanted this day to feel streamlined, focused. Focused? My voice rose. You mean without me there? This isn't personal, Olivia, he said, his tone a rehearsed softness that felt sharper than any shouting. It's just what's best for everyone. I gripped the cord, knuckles whitening. My brother's graduation, law school. I was the one who proofread his scholarship essays, who stayed up with him on the phone before big exams. And now I was being carved out of the picture like I was nothing? You're saying I'm not invited? I asked. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated how small I sounded. Olivia? He sighed, a long, heavy sound. It's complicated. We'll see you at the dinner next month. I'll have Irene send you the details. That's it? I swallowed hard, my throat tight. You're just cutting me out? He didn't answer. There was a faint scrape, maybe his chair pushing back. Then he said, Take care of yourself, and the line went dead. I stayed there, receiver pressed to my ear, listening to the hollow dial tone. My coffee had cooled, untouched, on the counter. The room felt different, smaller, like the walls had crept closer while I wasn't looking. For a moment, I couldn't move. I thought of Mason's smile when he got his acceptance letter, how he'd called me first, before Mom or Dad. I thought of every late-night talk, every time I told him he was going to make it. And now, on the day that was supposed to mean everything, I was erased. The landline clicked as I set it back on the hook. My hands trembled, just enough to make the cup rattle on the counter. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, staring at the pale Arizona morning outside my window, wondering when exactly I had stopped being family. The kitchen felt hollow, like someone had scraped the warmth out of it while I stood frozen by the phone. I moved on autopilot, carrying my cold coffee to the table where the sunlight made the scratches on the wood more obvious than ever. The wall across from me was a museum of old lives, or it had been. The biggest frame, once holding a picture of Mason and me on his high school graduation day, was gone. I had taken it down months ago when the glass cracked, meaning to replace it, but now the empty nail looked deliberate, like even the wall had decided I didn't belong. I sat there, staring at the blank space where our smiling faces used to be. In that photo, I was holding his cap in one hand, teasing him about how he wore it crooked. He had laughed, that deep laugh that always sounded too grown up for a teenager. I remembered ironing his shirt that morning because Mom was too busy getting her hair done, and Mason had been too nervous to do anything but pace. A lump rose in my throat. None of that mattered now. I might as well have been a stranger who just passed through the background of his life. The old voicemail machine on the counter blinked with a red light, waiting for me to press play. I didn't. I didn't need to hear Mom's voice telling me how complicated things were, or how I should understand, because Mason was under so much pressure. The silence between us already said everything. I pulled my phone closer. A notification glared from the family group chat, except it wasn't Team Beckett anymore. Someone had renamed it Graduation Buzz. I scrolled up, my chest tightening, as I saw messages about the ceremony, the party, the speeches. Mason's name was everywhere. Mine wasn't mentioned once. Dad had posted a photo of the gift table. Mom sent a picture of the venue with hearts and champagne emojis. Irene, never Mom when she was being cold, had tagged Mason in a post calling him their shining star. Not a single word about the sister who had proofread every application and mailed care packages when he was broke. I locked my phone before I could get swallowed by it. Sitting there, I thought about all the small, invisible things I had done for him growing up. Waiting outside the movie theater to pick him up when his friends' parents forgot. Spending my last paycheck on new shoes for his debate tournament because he didn't want to look like the broke kid. Those things didn't leave pictures or trophies. They just disappeared into the space between us, unspoken and now erased. I couldn't stay in that apartment, in that silence. My laptop was on the counter, lid dusty from disuse, but I opened it anyway. I typed one-way ticket, and the search bar filled with destinations I didn't care about. I picked Santa Fe because it sounded quiet and distant, like a place where no one would know me, where I could just be another woman staring out of a train window. The ticket confirmation hit my inbox before I even realized my hand was shaking. Departure, Thursday morning. No return date. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, the emptiness of the room pressing down on me. I wasn't chasing answers anymore. I just wanted to feel absent, like maybe disappearing for a while could save me. The train rolled slowly across the desert, its windows smudged with dust and sunlight. I sat with my forehead leaning against the glass, watching the flat expanse stretch into nothingness. Every so often, a cluster of sagging mailboxes or a single gas station appeared like a mirage, then vanished behind us. I felt untethered but oddly steady, like the train's steady hum was holding me together. No one on board knew me, no one cared where I was going, and that was comforting. I traced the rim of my paper cup, lukewarm coffee sloshing inside, and tried not to think of Phoenix. I didn't think of the apartment with the empty picture frame or the voice I would not hear on my voicemail. Instead, I thought about Santa Fe, a place I had chosen on a whim, without reason or history attached to it. It felt like a blank page, and I needed one. By late afternoon, the train slowed as the horizon shifted from endless beige to hints of red clay and faded adobe walls. Santa Fe greeted me with a dry breeze that carried the faint scent of wood smoke. The sky stretched wide and pale, turning shades of soft peach as the sun dipped. I hauled my bag over one shoulder, stepping onto the platform with the careful, deliberate steps of someone who didn't know where to go, but was determined to start anyway. The guest house I'd found online was tucked on a quiet street, a squat adobe building with a painted turquoise door and clay tiles that glowed in the evening light. The woman who answered the door introduced herself as Miriam, a retired painter with long silver hair tied into a braid. "It's small," she said as she led me inside. "But I always tell people small spaces make for honest living." The place smelled faintly of linseed oil and lavender. It felt safe. That night, I sat barefoot on the porch steps, the clay still warm under my feet. I opened my sketchbook, a habit I hadn't touched in months, and wrote the words, "Today, I belong to no one." It wasn't a sad thought, just the truth. I looked at it until the letters blurred, the page soft under my fingertips, before closing the book and sitting in the silence of the desert night. The next morning, I woke early to pale sunlight filtering through the curtains. I walked aimlessly, letting the narrow streets pull me along. Santa Fe moved at its own pace, slow, unbothered. I stopped at a food cart on a corner where a man was selling tamales wrapped in corn husks. The heat from the first bite surprised me, grounding me more than I expected. I turned a corner and noticed someone crouched near a weathered wall, adjusting the lens of a camera. A woman, maybe mid-30s, with a streak of sun-bleached hair and a camera strap worn smooth. She caught my glance and smiled, unbothered. "The murals here are fading," she said casually, like we already knew each other. "I'm trying to catch what's left before the sun takes it all." I found myself stepping closer. "They're still beautiful," I said. "So are the faded things," she replied, lowering her camera. "I'm Rowan." Her voice carried no questions, no assumptions, just presence. It felt like air after a long drought. Rowan found me sitting on a bench near the plaza 2 days later, sketching the outline of a chipped fountain. She crouched beside me, camera strap slung across her chest, and asked, "What are you doing Sunday?" Her tone was casual, like we'd been friends for years. "Nothing," I said, "which is sort of the point." She smiled. "Then come to dinner. No formalities, no RSVP, just bring yourself." I hesitated, but something in her voice, easy and unassuming, made it hard to say no. Sunday evening, she led me to a low adobe house tucked behind an alley, its doorway painted a vibrant teal. The door was open, letting out a warm hum of conversation and the smell of roasted peppers. Inside, The place looked like a collection of lives stitched together. Mismatched chairs, tables covered with paint-splattered cloths, old records spinning on a turntable in the corner. People I didn't know greeted me like I'd been there before. A woman with curly hair handed me a chipped glass of red wine, while a man with calloused fingers introduced himself simply as Jonah, nodding toward a guitar leaning against the wall. No one asked me where I was from or what I did for a living. It was just a room of people who seemed to exist without needing a reason to explain themselves. Rowan nudged me toward the table, already crowded with platters of tamales, bowls of beans, and roasted corn. "Sit wherever you feel like," she said. "There's always space." I slid into a chair, and a stranger with ink-stained hands passed me a plate, smiling as if we'd shared 100 dinners before. The conversation flowed around me. Stories about murals being repainted, music gigs, someone's broken-down van. I didn't have to perform to prove I belonged. I just was. At one point, someone raised a mismatched glass and said, "Here's to those who show up without needing a reason." Laughter followed, and I realized my shoulders had dropped, the knot in my chest loosening. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like ease. Not the forced kind I faked around family gatherings, but the real, simple kind that comes when no one expects anything from you. I spent the rest of the evening talking with Rowan on the back steps, the desert air cooling as night fell. She told me about the first mural she photographed, the one that started to peel the same day she finished capturing it. "There's something about catching things just before they disappear," she said. I didn't answer, but I understood. When I returned to the guest house, I didn't check my phone. I left it face down on the nightstand, the screen dark. I cracked the window, and just before sleep, I heard rain begin to fall, soft, tentative drops against the clay tiles. For once, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. By the third morning in Santa Fe, I felt almost untethered from my old life, as though Arizona and all its sharp edges had been a dream. But when I reached for my phone, the weight of reality returned. My notifications were full of messages from the family group chat, still renamed Graduation Buzz, like some cruel joke. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The first photo was Mason in his graduation robe, the sunlight catching on his polished smile. My parents flanked him, both looking too formal, too stiff. Mom's arm was draped over his shoulder in a way that made my chest ache. It used to be me standing on the other side, half hidden behind his grin. I zoomed in, more out of habit than curiosity, and something in the background caught my eye. A stack of invoices scattered on a side table, a calculator lying on top of them, as if someone had been working out numbers right before taking the shot. Another picture followed, Mason holding his diploma, a wine glass lifted like a trophy. Behind him, I could see an envelope with "Past Due" stamped in faint red letters, just barely in the frame. I stared at that corner of the photo, my mind spinning. The next image was even harder to look at. Mom's planner lay open on the kitchen counter during what looked like the after party. Blurry but clear enough to make out. Loan deadline, Friday, written in thick red pen. My throat tightened. I didn't need to guess what it meant. They were drowning in something. Debt, bills, maybe both. For a moment, I forgot to be angry about being excluded. I just felt the familiar pull, that instinct to fix things, to step in the way I always had. It was the same impulse that had me paying Mason's first semester fees when our parents said they couldn't. The same impulse that sent me wiring money home when the car broke down last winter. But then I remembered my father's voice, calm and cutting. An intimate gathering for immediate family only. I was close enough to pay, but never close enough to stand beside them. I locked my phone and let it rest face down on the nightstand. My chest felt heavy, like someone had pressed a hand against my ribs. Outside, the afternoon sun was starting to fade, painting the adobe walls with warm, forgiving colors. I tried to shake the feeling that I was staring at a picture of my family from the outside of a glass window, able to see everything, but never invited inside. Later, I walked into town and bought a cheap pencil set from a local shop. Back at the guest house, I opened my sketchbook and drew the shape of a doorway, empty and unwelcoming. I shaded the frame darker than the rest of the page. For the first time, I wondered if being erased from their celebration wasn't just about me. Maybe it was also about what they didn't want me to see. The first voicemail came on a Tuesday morning. I let it play on speaker as I sat on the porch with a mug of tea. My father's voice filled the quiet courtyard, firm but rehearsed. "Olivia, it's Dad. I know things have been tense, but I wanted to say we're thinking of you. Mason's graduation went well. I hope you're doing all right. Call when you can." I deleted it without saving the number to memory. 2 hours later, another message blinked on the machine. This time it was my mother, her tone warm but brittle, like she was forcing cheer through her teeth. Hi, honey. I just wanted to hear your voice. We miss you. Things have been a little overwhelming with the celebration costs. When you have a minute, let's talk, okay? I didn't call back. By Wednesday evening, there were 5 new messages. I listened to the next one, though I already knew what was coming. Olivia, Dad's voice was no longer calm. It had the edge of a man cornered. We could use some help. It's just a short-term thing. A loan, if you want to call it that. We'd hate to ask, but the venue fees. He cleared his throat. Well, you know how these things are. We'll pay you back. My stomach tightened. They weren't calling to mend things. They were calling because I was the last financial safety net they hadn't burned through. By Thursday morning, Mason's voice finally joined the chorus. His message was softer, like he was embarrassed. Liv, hey, I didn't know they were going to call you. I swear I didn't. But the truth is we're short, and my credit's a mess. Yours is, well, clean. If you could co-sign for just a bit, we'd fix it right after. Please? It would mean everything to me. I sat in the silence after his words, the phone warm in my hand. I could almost see his face. The same little brother I used to cover for when he broke Mom's favorite lamp. The same boy who'd call me crying after a failed exam. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to say yes. Then I remembered the way my father's voice sounded that morning on the landline, cutting me out with that tidy phrase, intimate gathering for immediate family only. They didn't want me in the photos. They just wanted me on the paperwork. I set the phone down and let the rest of the messages roll in without listening. It became a rhythm over the next 2 days, the blinking light on my voicemail flashing like a warning signal. By Friday night, I had stopped counting the calls. I let them pile up, unread, like a stack of unopened bills that didn't belong to me. I wasn't their emergency fund anymore. I wasn't their invisible sister, waiting in the background until someone needed a signature. For once, I didn't need to reply. By the weekend, the blinking voicemail light had stopped making me flinch. It just sat there, glowing in the corner of the guest house like a dying star. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were. Promises to pay me back, guilt wrapped in apology, sentences about family that felt more like threats than comfort. I opened my sketchbook and wrote a title in sharp, uneven letters. Terms no longer accepted. The first line came easily. Emotional debt disguised as love. Then another. Guilt for being the one who always says yes. And another. Silence as a substitute for understanding. I didn't write them as some kind of manifesto. It was just a list of everything I had allowed for too long, each word making me feel lighter, like I was shedding weights I hadn't realized I was carrying. That afternoon, Rowan invited me to a poetry reading in a cafe that smelled of cinnamon and strong coffee. We sat near the back, and I listened to strangers read words they had probably written at 3 in the morning, raw, clumsy, and honest. One woman read a poem about leaving her hometown, her voice trembling, and something about it cracked open a laugh inside me. It was sudden, sharp, and louder than I meant. Rowan looked over and grinned. Feels good, doesn't it? She whispered. I laughed again, softer this time because she was right. It did feel good. When we left, the streets were still damp from an earlier rain. Rowan walked me back to the guest house, and we lingered on the steps like we'd known each other longer than a few days. You look lighter, she said. I didn't argue. Back inside, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. There was one new voicemail, from Dad. His voice sounded heavier now, frayed at the edges. Olivia, we'll make this right. I promise. We just need you. We need your help, and we'll make it up to you somehow. I let the message play twice, not because I believed him, but because I wanted to memorize the tone, how desperation made even him sound small. Then I deleted it. That night, I booked a flight back to Phoenix, not to return, not to fold myself back into the corner of their family dynamic, but to pack up what was mine and leave again, for good this time. I added one last line to my sketchbook before bed. I am not a lifeline. I am a whole life. When I closed the book, I felt the kind of calm that comes after a storm. Not silence, exactly, but the steady hum of clarity. Back in Phoenix, the apartment felt like a place I'd already outgrown. The walls were bare, boxes half-packed, and my suitcase stood by the door like it was ready before I was. I folded a sweater, then another, moving slowly, as if my hands knew I was about to leave for good. The buzzer startled me, a harsh, impatient sound, as if whoever was downstairs didn't plan to leave until I opened. I walked to the intercom, hesitating, then pressed the button. Yes? It's us, my father's voice, flat but urgent. Open the door, Olivia. My chest tightened. I didn't answer. After a long pause, he added, "Please." I buzzed them in but didn't move far from the doorway. A few seconds later, they appeared. Harold in his neat polo, Irene with her purse clutched like a shield, and Mason standing between them, looking smaller than I remembered. Their presence filled the hallway, heavy with all the words they hadn't said until now. "Olivia," Mason said first, his voice soft, almost breaking. "We messed up. I messed up. I should have fought harder to have you there." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You didn't even try, did you?" He swallowed hard, glancing at our father, who stood stiff and silent. Irene stepped forward. "We made mistakes," she said carefully, her tone dripping with the kind of diplomacy she always used when she wanted me to be the forgiving one. "We just want to talk. Can we come in?" "No." My voice surprised even me, calm but solid. "You had your chance to let me in, and you made it clear where I stand." Dad finally spoke, his words more like a command than an apology. "Olivia, this family needs to stay together. Whatever happened, it's done. Let's move on." I stared at him, at the man who could slice me out of a celebration with a single call, and now stood there expecting me to bridge the gap. "You told me I wasn't close enough," I said quietly. "Now I believe you." Mason stepped forward, his face raw with something like regret. "We were wrong. I don't care about the money or the credit or any of it. I just want my sister back." I looked at him, at the brother I'd spent years quietly supporting, and realized I didn't owe him an answer that would make him feel better. "I'm not the same sister you remember," I said, "and I can't keep burning myself down just to keep everyone else warm." The elevator dinged at the end of the hallway. I grabbed my suitcase handle and rolled it past them. Harold stepped aside, jaw tight. Irene's eyes were wet, but she didn't speak. Mason just stood there, his hand half raised like he wanted to stop me, but couldn't. I didn't look back. The doors closed in front of me with a soft finality, the kind that tells you there's no going back. Not because you're angry, but because you're finally free of pretending. The plane lifted off just after dawn, the desert shrinking beneath the clouds like a memory finally letting go. I pressed my forehead against the cool window and watched Phoenix dissolve into nothing but beige and gold, a place I used to belong to but no longer needed. My carry-on sat beneath the seat, lighter than I expected. I had left behind more than I packed. The woman in the aisle seat was already asleep, her sweater bunched up like a pillow. I pulled out my sketchbook and flipped past the pages, filled with lists and half-finished drawings, until I found a clean sheet. At the top, I wrote, "Letter to my future self." The words came slow but steady. You stopped lighting yourself on fire just to warm people who left you in the cold. You walked away, not because you stopped caring, but because caring was starting to cost you yourself. The flight attendant stopped at my row, placing a paper cup of coffee on the tray. It smelled burnt and thin, but when I took a sip, it tasted like momentum, like something pulling me forward instead of holding me back. I thanked her, my voice soft but certain. Below, the sun was beginning to stretch across the horizon, painting the tops of the clouds in pale pinks and golds. I thought of Mason, of the photo where he looked so proud in his graduation robe. I wished him well, truly, but from a distance now. The version of me who would have dropped everything to save the day was gone, and in her place was someone quieter but stronger. A voice on the intercom mentioned we might see the northern lights from the plane later that night. I smiled at the thought, not because I expected it, but because the idea of something glowing just for me felt like enough. For once, I wanted something not to fix or hold together, but simply to admire. I flipped to the next page of my sketchbook and began to draw. Not the empty frames or the cracked kitchen table back home. I drew a horizon with no fences, just a wide open sky and the shadow of mountains underneath. A place that could be anywhere or nowhere, as long as it was mine. When I set my pencil down, I realized I was smiling. Not a wide grin, but something small and real, like the first breath after holding it too long. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and felt the plane climb higher. The past was below me now, where it belonged.